Hello, everyone, and welcome to Artist Talk with Wesley Gonzalez, which is part of event series The Space Between Us. The Space Between Us art exhibition and related events are dedicated to a very contemporary collective experience of shifted meaning of distance. Although the physical or measurable distance can be easily perceived, the mental one has twisted, stretched, and shrunk. And today we're going to be talking about how engagement with artistic activities able as observer of the creative efforts of others or an initiator of one's own can enhance one's moods, emotions, and physiological states. And now I will want to welcome Wesley. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate that. Wesley, would you mind introducing yourself shortly?
I'm Wesley Gonzalez. I'm a musician, and I was in a band called Wrestle years ago. I did 3 records, and then I've been doing solo stuff since about 2015, I think, and released 2 albums to date. I've got another album coming in March, and a lot of the solo stuff is very rooted in my process in psychotherapy, and I write a lot about mental illness and addiction and the darker side of the human psyche, I guess.
We're going to talk about quite personal topics, so feel free. I want to just note before, like, if you feel uncomfortable, you don't want to answer some question, please feel free to do so, and we just move to our question.
Sure thing.
Perfect. So I go ahead immediately a bit deeper. You have been describing your last 2 albums as pre-therapy and post-therapy albums. I was wondering, like, why did you decide to identify your albums like that? Like, how your creative process of these albums were affected by your current state?
I think the first album came about as the first album I did, which was the pre-therapy album in a sense, was sort of written during a point in time where I was at a very low point. I had a real problem with cocaine and drugs, you know, and I had gotten a bit lost of what I wanted to do with music. I was working a job I didn't like, and it all sort of got too much. And then I didn't really know, after the band had finished, whether I was even going to continue doing it, or whether I had just failed or you know, failed at the thing and should just restart doing something else. So a lot of it was written around that time, and and I was living in a very dark, sort of druggy flat with a lot of people who are quite dependent on drugs, and it was all feeding itself. And I think I wrote all these songs, they were sort of subconscious, you know, like I had to do something, so that's how I expressed it. And it's pre-therapy in the sense that I was maybe using that as the vehicle of therapy. The one thing I must say about that I don't think that record would have even, I don't think I even would have got to have it come out if I hadn't gotten therapy to sort of regain some sense of self, to feel confident in putting it out. And then naturally from that, the second album, Appalling Human, which I call the post-therapy, which, you know, maybe post is wrong because it was very much the focus, and I was very much in therapy. Yes. You know, it's not like I was cured. But, I had a lot of stuff going on at that time. I had a lot of family dissolution and sort of stopping speaking to a lot of family members, which has happened quite a lot during my life. And sort of dealing with that kind of thing, I was very suicidal around the time of the writing of that album. And there's songs that are direct references to that. But it's also the thing of that thing with therapy, when you start, it's very uncomfortable and you feel like you're out of sorts and stuff. And it takes a few months, well, at least it did for me. It took a few months for it to take hold, and you sort of understand. It's like retraining your brain to think about it differently. And I think it's sort of once it did change, I completely went with the curve of it, and I went, I love this, and this is really helping me, and it changed my writing in the sense that it was so open and so brutally honest about the place I was in or whatever. I mean, I've had a history of depression and anxiety like my entire life. I don't remember a point where I haven't suffered from it, even as a child. And it was just such a rewarding thing to be able to just let go of it and go, well, fuck it, this is what I'm going to write about, and this is, and to have the, you know, the sense of confidence that you're not in the wrong with it anymore, or you're not like it's fine for you to express that feeling. And it's sort of funny, it's like the new one that's coming out next year is very much rooted in, it's all about it was all written around this month where I broke up with my girlfriend of 7 years, and then my mum got a cancer diagnosis the same day. And it was a really heavy time. But this, I think, if anything, this is probably the post-therapy one, where it's like, I actually know how to deal with this stuff now. And the writing is, the writing has changed to be less, maybe less overbearing on myself, or that I'm the problem, and just going, there is a problem and it's shit, but it's also life, and seeing the effects of therapy and how that process has changed my overall outlook on everything. And then it's sort of like these three are like a trilogy of therapy works. I mean, I think the next thing I do after that will be a bit more detached from it, and not so, I want to do a record that's a bit less to do with it maybe. But it's been really interesting few years writing these records, and it's been really rewarding, and I couldn't be more proud of them. And yeah.
Absolutely, very happy to hear about your change, about the change in behavior. This is wonderful. So mostly like your creative process is impacted by your state, right? If I'm assuming it's correctly.
Yeah, I mean, my writing process doesn't really, I mean, I'm a big time workaholic, so I don't really stop. And I think maybe years ago when I was in the band and before I started in therapy and all that stuff, I would have long periods where I wouldn't write due to depression or whatever. And that's been a definite change that I can see from the therapy, is that I, whatever state I'm in, I'm still writing. Yeah. Whether that be, you know, ecstatic or incredibly depressed.
Yes. So your choice of subject matters for your music, because you're saying now you would like to move on a bit from your personal. What's coming to us now?
But I think it's more like a thing with it changing is just to sort of see what I can do as a songwriter in itself, or maybe, I don't know, I think it's interesting maybe to look at other people as well for a change, rather than just my own behaviors. Yes. Or maybe writing about stuff that's more relative to society as a whole. And then maybe write some stuff that's about some happier stuff, maybe.
So wonderful, looking forward for that as well. Maybe now we can play one video of yours.
Yeah, sure thing.
To brighten a bit. So I would say maybe we play a song, Did You Get What You Paid For?
Sure thing.
And then we can talk about this a bit after.
Yeah, no problem.
Something scene. Pretend I'm somewhat normal till I'm 15.
I got to know you to the song.
Oh yeah.
And I absolutely loved it. I find it very entertaining, but at the same time very touching.
Yeah.
And you really like hooked me up from the song. So I really would like to hear from you, like what was your creative process, how it came together, like lyrics, video itself. If I heard it right, you were asking your fans to film themselves attending your funeral. I'll share with you. Is it right?
Yeah, that is right. Yeah. I mean, in what I was saying when I was talking about the album Appalling Human that this track's from, that when I was saying about being suicidal, this is the one. And it was actually written after an attempted suicide, and I wrote it in a very weird and distressed space. And I think it comes together from asking, like, why am I compelled to do this in general? Why am I wired to be a musician or a songwriter or whatever, when it's a very difficult thing to be in this day and age? And you know, why do I gravitate so much towards art? Why can't I do a real job or something? And I think that's the whole thing with the "Did you get what you paid for? Do you all love me? Am I what you want?" You know, is that feeling of just, you know, being a bit out of sorts. And it's like it's also the funny thing that even in such a distressed, fucked up state, I was still making jokes, and it's very much like rooted in humor as well. I mean, I've got a very dark sense of humor, and which sometimes, you know, doesn't come to like commercial success with such a dark sense of humor. But it's one of my favorite songs. Well, I think it may be my favorite song that I've written, and like a weird thing where when you're at such a low point, it feels like a transitional thing, and you go, well, that I've sort of expressed that, and now I can get better, and you know, I can change from it. It's the same thing. It's like facing it. It's the same thing with asking people to film themselves at my funeral and make a video out of it, stuff like that. I mean, my mother's in the video, my sister's in the video, and you know, it's a weird thing asking my mum to come to my virtual funeral, but it's I think a way of facing it. Or I feel like if I'm not honest about it, or I'm not truthful about how I actually feel, I feel very self-contained, and I feel very claustrophobic from it now, which I wonder if that is a therapy thing, that I now, if I feel something, I have to let it go. I have to say what it is, because it starts eating me up inside if I'm like bitter and twisted about something and can't express it. But I think it really sums up what I'm good at, that song.
It's wonderful. I love the song, and it really actually brings me to in general your music. What I recognize is this juxtaposition of like having the music, which is kind of, if I can call it like that, upbeat, and it's more like bringing you like this wish to dance, and it's a bit more light, while you have such a dark and very personal kind of like topics and lyrics in the songs. How did you come up with this connection between these two?
It's a strange thing. I was talking about this the other day, and I was trying to think about it and like where it comes from. And I think it's like a really weird thing where it's just completely simple of like, I love dance music. like you know, that's my thing. I really like music with a lot of groove and a lot of funk to it, and sort of, you know, I love Sly and the Family Stone and Funkadelic and all that sort of stuff. And rhythm is a massive part of like the musicality of it. And it's like I don't process the lyrics as the same thing. You know, it's like in some way the lyrics would be better suited to be just left as maybe just poetry, you know. But because I'm obsessed with records and music and stuff like that, that's my way of juxtaposing the two things. But I think it's like the same with music. It's like I'm very drawn to music with like an extreme honesty, you know. I don't tend to love, I mean, I totally do love stuff like this as well, but I will much more gravitate to something that's darker and honest rather than some tune that's about being at a club or whatever, or something that I don't really have any interest in, or seems vacuous, or, you know, doesn't have any meaning. It feels like sometimes so much of pop music can feel really patronizing.
Yeah.
Because it's not coming from an honest place.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with, like, you know, how John Lennon writes or whatever, you know, it's like the same thing. It's like the difference between Lennon and Paul McCartney, and I love Paul McCartney and I may even prefer him, but it's like you can never get the same edge that you get from Lennon's honesty, and you really feel what he writes. And whether I agree or disagree with what he's writing about, maybe, it's like, at least it's honest, at least it comes from a place that I can relate to. Exactly. So I think that's probably where it comes from, the juxtaposing those two things.
Wonderful, thank you. I have to say, I have one song that I'm relating a lot, so I don't know if it's about my personal state at the moment, but I really would like to hear where it comes from you. There's a song called Wind Your Neck.
Pardon?
Wind Your Neck.
Oh, Wind Your Neck.
Wind Your Neck.
Yeah.
These words, if I think I'm thinking too much, is just in my head.
Yeah.
And make me question things even more. And you're saying so many questions in the song as well.
Yeah.
I can relate so intensely, but I really want to hear from you how this song come together.
Well, that was like a lot of the ones on that album, I can sort of really directly pinpoint what it was I was writing about. Mm. And I played at a festival in Wales, and I went for the whole weekend. I tend to just go for the day or whatever, but I was like, oh, I'll go and treat it as a holiday or something. And I took a lot of ecstasy, and we played this show, and I'd taken a lot of drugs, and I was drinking champagne, and I'd become like really overtly arrogant, and sort of, again, it's something I do as a coping mechanism, maybe, to performing or whatever, is to go so far the other way. But I got on my knees and I started shouting, "Hell is the heaven we all deserve." And it sort of came from nowhere. And I was going, "Hell is the heaven we all deserve. Hell is the heaven," and everybody was sort of a bit freaked out. And then I sort of spent the whole weekend walking around with people being a bit unsure of me, and sort of, you know, and then you get this social anxiety of whatever. And it's like, often the question is that has a direct question in it, which is like, do I freak you out or something? And it's like a thing, it's often which comes with a territory of therapy and being open, is when you're very extremely open, it can often make people very uncomfortable. And if I talk about things like suicide or drug addiction, or, you know, child abuse, or whatever, these things that I've, you know, experienced, I get the sense that somebody else can be really uncomfortable, and like, you know, and then you feel more of an outsider in a way. And as I wasn't in a great place, and I was on a lot of drugs, and I was sort of having these conversations with people, it all sort of, it's like this, I say a thing in it, it's like violence in a fabric tent or whatever. It's like that thing of being in a festival in this closed thing, and it's like, it's not physical violence, it's like, you know, the threat of that, you know, people's expectations of you, or whatever. And it's like, I you know, I'm not a huge artist, you know, I don't lead a hugely public life or whatever, but even in a small sense, it's, you know, it's very weird to sort of, if you're in a festival where there's a bunch of music fans, and you will run into people who go like, "Oh, I really like your record," or, you know, whatever. And I maybe wasn't used to it at that time, so that's where it came from. I wrote it about that, and it sort of feeds into that. A lot of that time was like, you know, overthinking, thinking about everything, not switching off, like not sleeping, not you know, not treating myself well and drinking a lot and all these things. And you can get in a cycle of it, and it that just becomes everything, you know. It's like, just, everything was to do with, especially thinking about what I was doing and my career and music, and, you know, like the things I would beat myself up about would be, why don't you write any happy music? You don't write anything that's happy or pleasant, or, you know, you don't have the ability to be nice about something. What's wrong with you? Why are you like this? And again, it's like early stages of therapy where I think I still hadn't really gotten into the flow of it, and I was still very much suffering from anxiety far more than I do now. But it's yeah, it's another favorite off that record. I think it's I mean, anxiety is it's becoming more and more prevalent, you know, and it's like it's becoming far more a universal thing that's being talked about. And it's like it's like before writing that record or whatever, or going into therapy, I didn't really know I had anxiety, or you know, I thought everybody was like that, and you know, whatever, and that it was just constantly thinking too much. So it's like a thing of exploring it, because it was like a new thing, because it's like I can finally sort of kind of call this something and understand what it is.
Yes, which brings me to the fact that, like, it seems that you're sharing quite a lot, like you even identifying your albums around the therapy in a social media. It seems that you're not really avoiding to share your feelings, your personal state at that moment, which I find super amazing, and I really appreciate that. But I wanted to ask you, does it require courage from you, or do you see any importance of sharing this as from you as a musician, like being followed by people?
I think it's just I can't stand the idea of being phony about something, or not saying it like it is, because it feels like as a global society, that's what it feels like. It feels like nobody's truthful. Nobody goes, oh, this is shit, or I can't, like it. Negativity is such a big part of everybody's lives, you know, and then you get this outward sheen of, you know, a capitalist society, and I don't agree with it. I don't like it. You know, it's like I don't want to be talked down to. I've got, like, when I was going through therapy, and things that would trigger me in an angry way or whatever would be feeling patronized, being talked down to, whatever. That's like if anything's going to get me riled up, that's the one. So, I mean, it's difficult, because there is also drawbacks from it, and there's times where people who are fans of the stuff don't draw a line of distinction between what I'm writing about and what I'm actually like day to day, and what I would like to sort of have a chat about. You know, sometimes it can go to a very, very heavy place very quickly. And I'm an artist. I'm not a therapist. There's a lot of stuff people tell me, and I really can't do anything about that. And it's horrible that you're going through that, but it's also can take a toll on my own mental health as well. When you have people sort of telling you about very heavy things that are going on with them, or can trigger things that, for me, that I'm like, oh, I know that feeling so well. So there's definite drawbacks to it, but I'd rather take the drawbacks and be honest than to, I don't know, not be true to my real character and what it is that I'm actually like.
Yeah, absolutely wonderful. Thank you. Maybe now I will choose to play another song. I would play now Change.
Yeah, fab, perfect.
find the song quite motivating, so that's why I chose to play the song at this point of our talk. But maybe please you can share how this lyric comes.
that I mean, if that's by far the most hopeful one on that album at least, and it's rooted in something dark, but it is, I agree in the sense that it's very much like trying to motivate somebody. It was my friend was going through he was going through sobriety and sort of a life change, and sort of going through an intervention and stopping drinking and realizing that there was a dependence to it. And it's a very difficult thing, you know, when, especially, you know, as a sorry.
No worries.
It's a very difficult thing when you're sorry, this is a nightmare. I'm gonna quickly, I'll be back in 2 seconds.
Yeah, no worries. Sorry, bad timing. It's not disturbing for me, at least. I don't know if it's it's not disturbing for me, so it's
oh right, okay, that's good.
Yeah.
That's good. So where was I? Changed. It's about my friend's sobriety, and it's a weird thing when you're a, you know, drinker, drug user, or whatever, which I don't use drugs anymore, but I still have a drink and whatever. But at that point, I was definitely not in a great place myself, and it like a real test of empathy in a way, of to sort of like to see how he must feel in that situation, and to sort of speak how I'd want to be spoken to. And often, you know, it's hard, like it's very hard to have just a normal conversation about it. So I think it came out in that track. And I mean, it's like, so I'm trying to think back to like sort of the time I was writing it. I think it was writing it for my friend, but also, and to give him the support, but also to maybe question the things that, you know, drove me to, you know, be a heavy drinker or to use drugs or whatever, why I needed that escape myself. And to sort of, you know, it's the thing, like, if I want to continue to be able to have a drink or whatever, I've got to ask, you know, those questions of like how I would deal with it, or how that person's dealing with it, whether I would be able to do it myself, whether, you know, am I too weak to have some semblance of that in my life or whatever.
Yeah.
And I mean, you know, I've got a lot of family in recovery. I've got a lot of family of, you know, a lot of addicts in my family. And it's such a big part of British culture as well. It's, you know, it's, and often you're getting a intervention from a lot of people who you're getting pissed with, you know, and sort of, or family that you've, you know, have had a long history of drink problems or whatever. And I think that song really holds up in that sense of like, again, in the sort of the honesty of it, which it doesn't come from just being honest about, you know, maybe something like using drugs or whatever. It's more honest in like, oh, this is how I feel about you, and this is how I want you to, you know, it's like the thing, it's like trying to tell somebody not to beat themselves up about something.
Yes.
But then again, I beat myself up so much every fucking day, you know. It's not it's much easier to say to somebody else, but also in a way you're writing it to say it to yourself, you know. Or maybe I didn't realize that at the time, but at least a year later or something, I could listen to it and go like, oh, I can sort of see why I was doing that, or what the patterns in my life led me to sort of like go, I have to address that for myself, and I have to grow up a bit, maybe be a bit more sensible about, you know, looking after myself or whatever.
So we talked about your creative process, and I would like to look more into different perspective, more as a curator side of the music.
Yeah, sure.
So you used to work in a record shop. right? So you were selecting and creating a lot of music, and you have a most amazing podcast, which is called Recent Feel. So in this podcast, you're sharing all the new tracks and you're chatting about them a bit, which is very entertaining.
Yeah.
It has different styles of music. I really highly recommend this.
Mm.
So I wanted to ask, like, again, we're gonna look through a more mental health kind of perspective into music.
Yeah.
I was just wondering if, I think everybody is choosing this differently, but how it works for you. Do you select music according to your mood you are in, like to support the mood you are surrounded with, or do you want to, other way around? Maybe you get into the mood according to the music you're listening to.
I think it's like my listening patterns. It's interesting, the going to the record shop and then doing the podcast and stuff. One of the main reasons I started doing the podcast was because I stopped working at the record shop. And the good thing about the record shop is every Friday, every album that comes out, you listen to everything that comes out. And when I wasn't doing that anymore, I was like, oh, well, I'm going to give myself something that makes me listen to everything that comes out. But I think as like a day-to-day fan of music, I find listening to music as a musician is a very weird thing. And you the more you do it, the more your relationship as a fan changes. And I mean, I was a really music obsessed child and teenager, and I've always been the same. But at certain points you become more focused in on like what other people are doing in the way that they're writing or the technical aspects of what they're doing. So a lot of the time it can be a very unemotional thing. It can be a very like tactile thing of like, I'm going to listen to everything because I need to get ideas for something, or I need to see what else is going on. And that sort of inspiration thing becomes a very weird thing, you know. And then there'd also be periods of time, it's like, you know, lots of times when I'm really low or depressed, I just won't listen to music. I'll listen to talk radio or podcasts or people talking. And that, I think that stemmed from working in record shops and being surrounded by music all the time, that on my downtime I would not want to listen to music because on my downtime I'd be making music as well. So I had a good few, like there's a song on Appalling Human called Used to Love You, which is sort of all about me working at the shop and sort of saying I used to love music. I don't love music anymore. Like, I don't love listening to it. And again, go back to the therapy thing, referencing it to sort of change my perspective on it. And often a lot of the times with music, I have to change course and go, well, I have to, you know, completely change everything I'm listening to and focus on something completely different because I've used up everything I can get out of that. It's like the same thing with, you know, I was thinking about it before when I was looking through what you'd written of what we were going to sort of chat about. And I was thinking about it and I was trying to think of records that had made me cry in the last few years or whatever. And the one that I remember really vividly, and it's such a weird reason to cry, was the song Juice by Lizzo, which is not a sad song whatsoever. But I cried because it was so immaculately written. It was so well written that I actually burst into tears, and I was like, I can't believe that something this good exists. And often it won't be an emotional reason that sets me off. It will be a really, you know, structural thing. And it can be anything. It can be something that's like nothing, you know, really happy song or whatever, that will also a song about partying or something, and I'll be like, oh, this is just fantastic. It's so well made. And then I was trying to think about what other stuff had actually got me in an emotional sense, and I like, it made me a bit worried because it was like, oh, I don't cry from an emotional place, or, you know, whatever. I'm still in touch enough to feel some emotion, but I don't really know what it is that triggers it anymore. And it's like, it sounds, again, it's like the thing of being very honest about it. It's like, you know, I don't want to be negative on music because it's like, you know, it's my main thing. I love it. And it's like doing the podcast has made me really pleased to engage with everything that's coming out. I think it's the same thing of like, of being a musician is like, there's been times where it feels like you're in constant competition with everybody around, or why is that person getting this thing and I can't get a thing, or whatever, you know. And it's very easy for people to become embittered within it, and sort of, you know, and I've definitely had periods of it. It's like that song is definitely, there's a element of bitterness that comes with it. And it's the same thing with setting up a task, you know, that, oh, if I do a podcast, I have to listen to everything.
Yeah.
And I have to do that to sort of reconnect with it. And I used to do that when I was growing up. I used to set myself like, not competitions, but like a goal that I'd listen to, just like, I remember just 1 week, I'd only listen to Electric Light Orchestra for 1 week and see how much I could stand. Or I remember I did it once, and it was like a weird social experiment as well. I was at school and I decided to listen to only Captain Beefheart for 1 week. And I think I got in 3 fist fights. It was like, it was so, it brought out this weird violent side to myself, and like couldn't take things. I was very easily angry. And I guess it's the extreme nature of that music. It's not easy listening music and stuff. And I guess looking at even listening is from an artistic point of view, and to sort of like, to take, well, I think it's like it's kind of like an addict mentality. It's like, I have to take it to the absolute extreme to get what I need from it. And, you know, and that was when I was like 14, you know, that was, you know, it's always been a very extreme thing, music. It's like, it's the same thing. It's like, you know, when you get that thing where you can just listen to one track over and over and over again, and I can do that for, yeah, I go days and days, and I listen to the same song over and over again. And it's also the same with writing. You know, if I write something good,
yeah,
that next 2 days, I'll listen to it like 200 times, and I'll sort of, and I'll be telling myself, like, you know, it's like the thing of like making sure, it's like being a bit of a perfectionist or whatever, or that everything's in its right place, and telling myself that the next time I listen to it, I'm going to hear a mistake. Next time I listen to it, I'm going to hear what's wrong with it, and I'll figure out how to fix it and make it even better or whatever. And it's like an obsessive thing, you know.
Yeah. So Wesley, you answered, as I said, like all my questions. So I think we can be wrapping up already. But maybe at the very end, I would like to play a song from your new album. So
Sure
I'm
thing.
thinking to play Wax Limousine.
Yeah, wonderful.
Would you like to add some words about this before?
Yeah, Wax Limousine. That's again, you've chosen another one of my favorites. That was written for this new album. As I said before, it was written between a breakup and a cancer diagnosis in the family, and that was sort of, I was listening to a lot of gospel music, and on the way there's 2 tracks. One was Holy Holy by Aretha Franklin, and the other one was Faithless by Scritti Politti. And I had 2 of them on a playlist, and they just go on loop, and I listened to it for about 2 days, and I can really hear the references in that song, you know, to both those things. And it's like Wax Limousine was like terminology I came up with to sort of express feeling useless, you know, in a lot of situations when you're dealing with somebody, you know, being very ill, like cancer or whatever. It's like, you know, and breaking up, both of those things can make you feel absolutely useless and pointless, and what's the point in anything. And it's like lots of old phrases like, you know, as useless as an ashtray on a motorbike or something like that. It's like I wanted to make up my own version of it.
Yeah.
And I was also listening to a lot of Prince as well, so it's definitely me trying to be a bit like Prince, Wax Limousine. But yeah, it's just sort of, it's also about the sort of parts of breaking up that I don't think are as widely represented in modern songwriting, such as splitting up possessions, or you know, there's a line about a grey rucksack, do you need that back? And stuff like that. Yeah. And the practicality of like, oh, I really like that jumper, I don't want to give my jumper back, you know. And the sort of tedium of it as well, you know, it's a very you know, when you break up when you live with somebody and you're so closely intertwined with them, and you sort of it's painful and dark, but a lot of it, which you don't really realize before entering into a situation like that, is how tedious it is.
Yeah.
And sort of the moving out and going, okay, well, you'll be there for a week, I'll go stay at my mum's, and then you're out of town, so I can go and stay in the flat for a couple of weeks or whatever. So it was very much during all that process. So that's what it's all rooted in.
Thank you a lot. Well, Wesley, thank you for being so open. It was absolutely amazing. Is there anything? Sorry, is there anything you want to pitch? You have like a new album coming out. Is there a tour planned?
New album, Wax Limousine, which is out. I don't remember the exact date, but it's out in March next year. And there's a couple of tracks. Wax Limousine, A Taste of Something New's just come out recently as well. That's from the album too. And then there's another single coming out soon. So just sort of like doing a lot of stuff for that, figuring out videos, and you know, the wheel never stops turning. So yeah, and then we're going to be hopefully touring as much as possible next year as well. I'm really hoping we can figure out what the fuck's going on with Brexit and actually come and play some shows in Europe soon as well. So yeah, but we're going to be busy next year, which will be great.
Sounds exciting. Very looking forward. Please come to Austria.
Indeed. Yeah, no, I really would love to.
Wonderful. Then thank you a lot. And I will be playing now Wax Limousine and Stock.
Brilliant. Cheers.
Can I clarify?